opposition or counter necessarily, but what I'm saying is we're not trying to be some kind of escape. We're not trying to be in denial of the fact that the mainstream does control the dominant worldview because it is the de facto church, the world state church. And backing away is not the answer. In fact, even though I'm not on the site, I plan to continue to set up YouTube channels and I'm going to continue to stream on all of them. But I just want to make the point that we have our own platform. InfinitePlaneSociety.com. A number of domains go there. IPS.monster is just the latest one I've been using because the idea here is the monster is the kraken noise that you hear, and the kraken represents this thing that is huge, this titanic thing, but you can't see it when it's below the water, so they might not notice you. They might conveniently ignore you, but like in all the Godzilla movies. But then when he finally surfaces, it's too late. And we're planning, we're conducting what you could call, in a way, a media insurrection. That's, in a way, sort of what we're doing. It's more of a philosophical thing because the general public has a great misunderstanding about what media actually is. They just assume it must be real because it looks so fake, because the smartest man in the world said that. And all these rocket scientists, just brilliant. The ones who all fell for the sausage in space and thought it was an actual star. Just so credulous. Dangerously credulous. Now I saw a comment in here that caught my eye. And we're not going to rush into the list of things that we're going to be discussing today because I want to give people time to show up. I sent out text alerts, I sent out newsletters, but again, we lost thousands of subs as far as our ability to reach out. But it's not a big deal. We're bouncing back fast, and that's literally thanks to everyone here. Wonka World says, hello, fringe dwellers. You could say fringe, you could say cutting edge. They think fringe, but the truth is cutting edge. I just saw this article, I think it was from Salon, and it was like, why are libraries refuges for the mentally ill? And I'm like, I spent the best years of my life in the libraries, and I kind of resented that. I was like, what are they talking about? And again, I think this is the idea that information is deadly, information is bad, information needs to be regulated or something. We may talk about that as well. I'm surprised they haven't burned books yet. I thought they were going to use COVID as an excuse to burn books. They did digitally, but I mean, I remember in some article, I think it was in North Korea, they were burning cash that had possibly had the stuff on it. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue through the list of comments. There's something that really stood out to me. Oh yeah, here it is. From Salty Siren. I get Princess Diana energy from Ghislaine. Okay, think about that. I get Princess Diana energy from Ghislaine. And I do too, without even looking at Princess Diana. Just thinking of her face when you brought that up. And it makes perfect sense. I'm going to have to do some comparisons. And what really stood out to me is that the last video that got us banned was the one called The Dark Side of the Kennedys, or Dark Side of JFK, where I was talking about the new JFK movie, Marilyn Monroe movie, and how it depicts John F. Kennedy as just being a monster. Way worse than Clinton. Way worse. That was the one that got us taken down. But what I brought up was that John F. Kennedy Jr. had an affair with Ghislaine Maxwell, way before the Q years. I mean, imagine that. And what's even stranger is he had an affair with Princess Diana. Now, if Diana and Ghislaine are the same person, it makes more sense. I mean, I've heard the wildest things, and strangely, there is this theory, like right now, it's really big that Princess Diana is about to come back. I think 24 hours ago, she said in 24 hours she's going to come back. She said it on Twitter. I got to go find that account. It's this bizarre mix of like fan fiction and political zealotry on the right, where they are worshiping dead celebrities and dead royalty, and they're waiting for Princess Diana and Michael Jackson to come down on a UFO and help them vanquish the library storytime drag queens. It's like really twisted these days. And the idea that their hero, JFK Jr., did it with Ghislaine, that's crazy in itself. But the strangest thing that I've heard yet is that Princess Diana is, well, I don't even want to say it. Maybe I will. I didn't say it. I didn't come up with it, but some people believe that David Furnish is Diana. You know, Elton John's husband. And I looked, and they have a very similar smile. I'll go with that. All right, let me go through some comments. Joined here by here in the Discord server where you can throw animated GIFs and they will pop up on the screen. That's one of the things we've added. When we moved into Discord as the main think tank, we gave us the ability to have a live meme stream 24/7 on the screen. We also have TTS, text to speech, on when I'm not live, which is very useful. The other day I was just listening kind of passively and I was hearing some text to speech comments that just, things that I had to take note of. Let's see what else is going on. Someone had mentioned that the Vatican is having all of its money returned, and there's some rumor on Q Street that they're going to be paying back a lot of, they're going to pay for our electric bills, I think, or something. Jasara and Nasara, we'll see. Miguel says, is it me or do flat earthers seem inherently much smarter than everyone else? I would say no, not necessarily. If we did a Venn diagram, God, it's kind of tough to say. It depends because you can't broad brush the flat earthers. I would say that the non-domed enclosed ones are obviously much smarter than others, but the ones who are stuck with the biblical model are often just as, and when you say smarter, I think maybe you're referring to situational awareness. Are they aware of how much news is actually just propaganda? Are they aware of how much fake has dominated the real? And I would say no, the people who know what's going on are the ones who've questioned the fundamentals, who haven't fallen for the trap of joining a cult, which is what the Domers became. It became a huge cult. And not only was it a cult, but they weren't interested in disproving the idea that we were underneath some great magnificent dome, which we might be. I have no reason to believe so, though. Like I see these videos on Twitter where people are showing Elon Musk's rockets and they're saying, oh, look, it's hitting the firmament. No, it's a light show. And it does look kind of strange at night. It looks like it's going through some kind of a portal, but it's just the light and the trails. But to suggest that it's hitting, quote, the dome, it raises a lot of questions that nobody answers. Like, if there is a dome, is it curved or is it flat? If it's flat, then it's not a dome. If it's curved, then it ends somewhere. Are you going to say it ends outside of Antarctica or something? And then does it hit the ground?
You have now entered the New World Order's AI construct, where nothing is as it seems. Your dreams and aspirations have been selected for you. All that makes you who you are was predetermined by the now functioning AI. Free thought is no longer an option. We now have control over all things, including the very thoughts we allow you to have. Do not try to resist. Welcome to the masquerade.
Welcome to the masquerade.
Alright, this is the Masquerade JT33 featuring Symbia. Linked in the chat below. Today is 10/22/2022, and we're just a couple of weeks away from the midterm elections, which may not sound all that interesting compared to a presidential election, but I listen to the extremists on all sides, and it seems to me that the right is treating this as though this will determine the results of 2024. So you can expect some kind of psyopery on either side. Some suggest that the Dems are going to lose, and so they're going to interrupt the election with some kind of a psyop. Others say it's going to come from the right. But the thing is, if there is a psyop, I'm pretty sure the scripting has it pegged as a right-winger. Probably a QAnoner. We haven't heard any real extreme QAnon stories in a few weeks. They've been kind of quiet. Maybe they're planning something. I'm expecting the next McVeigh. And then on top of it, the J6 panel just subpoenaed Trump, demanding testimony. And I read their subpoena, and it reads like an accusation. The letter outlines sweeping requests for documents including personal communications between Trump and, quote, extremist groups. And by extremist groups, they'll mean Proud Boys. Founded by the crisis actor Gavin McGinnis, Gavin McSmollett, who fake swatted himself. Most of them are just actors, as most of you here know, actors and comedians. Baked Alaska, the QAnon shaman, they're all actors and comedians. Another thing, this is kind of along the same lines, Alex Jones, another comedian, if you believe the Bill Hicks story, or if you just find him tremendously funny. I mean, I think Alex Jones is a comic and a comedian in his own right. Doesn't have to stand on the shoulders of Bill Hicks or whatever. But look, the Sandy Hookers are seeking 2.75 trillion dollars additionally, in addition to the billion. So another 2.75 trillion, and I read about how they arrived at this number, and I think it's like every time the offensive meme was repeated and shared times $500, they did the math. They have receipts. Jones owes the Sandy Hookers $2.75 trillion for hurt feelings. I mean, that's big, and he's not going to be able to pay it. Unlike, for example, Kanye, who's been hit with $250 million for calling the George Floyd death a death by overdose. Well, the George Floyd family is asking for $250 million from Kanye, who can pay it. Can Jones pay that? I don't think so. Maybe not now. Kanye can pay. Although he's already paid the George Floyd family. He gave them $2 million for Floyd's daughter to go to college. So in addition to the 2 million, I guess they need 250 more million. But anyway, as far as Jones paying 275 trillion, I don't think it's all that possible. When it was just 1 billion, I thought, well, he could make that happen over time, but this is intentionally meant to sink him. I have a comment here. Angst G says, completely absurd. This is how they wish to stop free speech. This was obviously nothing but a show trial. Totally fabricated, as fake as the school shooting itself. Next commenter says, next step, a few Brazilians. Yeah, I mean, this is really impossible. There aren't any trillionaires. The only way you'd become one, I think right now, today, is to go into space and mine. If you go into space and you mine for asteroids, you could become a trillionaire. This is where the first trillionaires will be space mining companies. Now, Jones is buddies with a few people like Rogan, and I think he's adjacent enough to people around Musk's circle that he could probably work his way into getting into the space mining industries, and he might be able to pull down $1 trillion worth of wealth from outer space to give to the Sandy Hook families. But can the world handle trillionaires? I don't think so. Billionaires aren't sustainable by the logic of the greenies, the environmentalists. They don't think we can even handle trillionaires. No way. Are we going to let Alex Jones mine space to bring down money to pay off this lawsuit? Is it worth the world being destroyed? Climate change, like I said, it's unsustainable at that level. That kind of wealth would disrupt everything. And this is what the movie Don't Look Up is all about. Do we mine the comet or do we dodge it? Do we deflect it? And if you mine it, you run the risk that it runs into us, but really what they were implying was that the world can't handle that kind of wealth injection, that kind of stimmy. It would send its world off it would tilt it off its axis. The world would flip. If you believe it's a ball. If it's a disc, it would just literally flip over. All right, we're joined by Jason Kimbrell. Says, got to hang out with Chief Crow last night during his sound check. What a kind and funny dude. Yes, and if you haven't seen Chief Crow live, he was just live the other night at the Oktoberfest event in North Carolina at a Shriner Lodge, a Mason Lodge. Only initiates got to hear it, I guess. But yes, I've seen him live. Many of us here have listened to him many times. He used to perform live shows on Saturdays, and we'd often cover it. Maybe he'll start that again. Chief Crow has a new album out. Just go on Spotify and search Chief Crow and download it yourself. Joined by Linda Curtis, Penguin Doctor AJ206, E. Volmint, Zin Valis, Hig, Osam, Thirst. Thanks for joining, everyone. 8K All Day 2323 Symbia, who's featured on that JT33 track we were just playing. Lean Dion, Robert Bell, Otto Hoaxer, Waynell Sexton, one of my favorite crisis actresses. You know who the worst actor in the world is and the most overpaid actor in the world? Yep. Robbie Parker. You think he could have paid for some acting lessons in the last 10 years? And can I even say that? Can I espouse that opinion without being liable for trillions of dollars in damages? Wayne Dion says AJ is hilarious AF. Yeah, if you don't listen to Alex Jones, you might not know this, but he is pretty funny in his own right, and his commercials are all just impersonations, wacky voices. Total Bill Hicks, classic. All right, let's see. Phones are open 833-311-1984, joined by X322. Yeah, this is Infinite Planes Saturnday. Nick Otrama says, I disagree, Tim. There are trillionaires. They just don't make the Forbes top 100. This is provable. I'd like to know more. But you're talking mostly about, I'm assuming, old money. I mean, like this idea that someone could just go to space poor and bring down that kind of wealth that wasn't even in our system. That's kind of what they're implying would be the major disruption. And they have said that billionaires and their lifestyle is not sustainable. I mean, what could you do if you were a trillionaire? What couldn't you do? You could dig a hole to the center. I mean, you could do anything with that kind of money. And I think that's what is implied here. Nothing would stop you. And again, this is Alex Jones's tab now for opinions he doesn't even espouse. That's the thing. Alex Jones has backtracked on all of it. He doesn't even believe these things. He merely gave platform. And the whole premise for these damages is that the families were terrorized by his listeners who were going over to their houses and harassing them. So they say. But I'm wondering, well, what about them? Are they not going to be liable, or is it only this guy? I mean, it's a new model, I guess. And I've seen this building up with this recent story of Molly Russell. She's the one who has this on her death certificate. It's going to say death by internet. You know, like you can have death by climate change, death by misinformation. Well, if you go on the internet and you read something and it puts you in a bad mood, and then the algorithm suggests similar stories, and then you take your own life, yeah, you can blame whoever posted that content. Or I guess they're going to find some way to incriminate the original poster at some point. It's kind of like if you're an alcohol dealer here, a bartender. If you overserve somebody, you could be held liable if they crash. Well, if you make somebody cry on the internet, or if in some way you offend them, you could be liable for their emotional responses. Maskless Faceless 0820 says Jones is an actor. It's possible. He could be a real patriot fighting the deep state, but I have a lot of problems with that whole premise, and it seems like they've forgotten this. I mean, in 2020, I saw gigantic flags, massive flags that all said Trump, JFK Jr., 2020, 2024, 2020. It's like either one, you still see people saying it's JFK Jr. But it seems like in the last 6 months, ever since the spotlight was really put on the QAnon, they kind of backed off their worship of the Kennedys, and now they're trying to bring in Kanye. Roger Stone was like, Kanye West should run with Trump, which is interesting, an interesting choice. And I do think that there's some kind of attempt by Trump to jump on top of the buzz that Kanye has excited recently with his, admittedly, I mean, he admits it, he says it's anti-Semitic talk. I don't know what that even means. It's one of these terms that's lost all meaning, just like hate speech at this point. But yeah, Kanye has been on this tear about the quote Jewish media mafia, and then Trump posts something on his social media, Truth Social, in which he says, U.S. Jews need to get their act together and vote for me, or something like that. But calling them out as a collective, they need to get their act together. Like, anyway, that was just, I think, his coattail writing. But yeah, Roger Stone was suggesting Kanye West should run with Trump. You have Trump with Truth Social, Kanye West buying Parler, and then, of course, Musk's got Twitter, and that is going through. Now, the thing about Parler, I mean, how convenient is this? And this tells you it's all scripted, and they're all actors, obviously. Here you have Kanye West buying Parler after exciting all of its users. The very people who want to hear Kanye call out Piers Morgan or George Soros and call out, quote, the Jewish media mafia, the people who are into Parler are into that kind of rhetoric. And he started this rhetoric after the White Lives Matter shirt that he wore at his fashion show, alongside who? Candace Owens, the 33-year-old right-wing provocateur who happens to be the wife of Parler's CEO. She's right there in the revenue stream. The more hype that they can get, the more they can bring people into Parler. I mean, it's all just it's clever, I'll say. Yeah, Kanye goes by Ye now. I'm not going to be told. I'll say the artist formerly known as Kanye, I guess. I guess I should respect it. It's just annoying to me being told, that I have to change my speech or I'm being disrespectful. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just using what everybody knows you as. But by the way, he's living out something. Kanye West, he's living out the lyrics of a song he released 10 years ago called BLKKK SKKK Head, Black Skinhead. And the Black Skinhead happens to feature a sample of Marilyn Manson, which we've talked about this before, and it may be relevant again here in the near future, just pointing it out. There are so many flags here suggesting that this is political theater, and they're on a calendar. In fact, this is just a reality TV show. This thing with Ye is just Kardashian season. What season would this be? 30 something? It never ended. The Kardashians never ended. And I would even say The Apprentice never ended. We must be in season 15 or 16 of The Apprentice starring Donald Trump. We have so many concurrent reality TV shows going on right now. But a lot of them are presented as real, and the public doesn't know the difference. Look what they've done with the space station in its 24th season. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, I didn't realize you'd be on this early. This is Lynn Ertel.
Hey, Lynn, are you going to donate to help Alex Jones raise $2.5 trillion to pay off the Sandy hookers?
Well, we're being told that that's all theater because one thing my neighbor observed is that they actually reported that Jones wasn't physically in the courtroom, which is up there in Connecticut, right?
Right.
That he was doing his show in the studio down there in Austin, Texas. And so how could it have been a real trial if Jones this is something that Miles Mathis points out in his analysis of it, that how could this be a real trial if Jones wasn't even really in the courtroom? So what, he was testifying by video, is that right?
Interesting point on this last one. It seems like that's what they're doing. And there's a lot of room here for it to be obviously fake. But in a related one, you have the other guy, Jim Fetzer. He was actually sued and hit with $450K.
But he showed up in court.
Right, exactly.
He showed up in court, but Lenny Posner did not, or a different. They sent an actor in place of Lenny Posner. Is that correct?
That's
on at least one occasion.
And look, this is why I think Fetzer's the real deal. And that's the name of his show, I think, isn't it? But like he literally called this guy out to the judge. He said, that's an actor. That's not the guy. And I do think he was hit with that money. And he did lose his publishing company. Like, he did have repercussions, real ones. And I do think that he never backed down. Fetzer has not backed down from his initial statements about this being a DHS drill being used to dupe the public.
So this is important, because this is where we separate the real from the fake. Is that right?
Correct.
And we need certain criterion for doing that. So that's what you're basically establishing, certain criteria we can use from a legal point of view, at least, to show that some of it's authentic and some of it's not.
Right. Like, how far do they go into faking the courtroom drama? Someone on Discord messaged me about one of these alleged death-faking rappers, but years later, there's still some court activity going on with the alleged shooter. And it makes me wonder, well, is this like a protracted story? Do they just keep it up for appearances? And yeah, this is what we have to do: separate real from fake. Is someone like Kanye a rogue, or is he a Truman Show-like actor being handled?
Well, I had that discussion with the fakeologist the other night, and he is pretty insistent on the idea that, well, because of the way Kanye referenced the George Floyd narrative, and of course is now being sued by the family of George Floyd. Is that correct?
Correct.
For claiming that Floyd died of fentanyl, overdose of fentanyl or something. But the question I posed was, is Kanye just clueless? How can that be? How can he not have a clue that this George Floyd thing was I mean, look, there are African American podcasters out there who have dissected this. Not a lot of them, but certainly several who I've watched dissect that whole George Floyd thing as fake, and they've largely characterized it as a kind of Masonic psychodrama in which and pointed out that Floyd probably died several years earlier.
I've seen that
and
one.
that as you
Yes, I've seen that case
right.
made.
So you understand how I'm circling around this target here and trying to figure out what the F is going on? Because you're going to tell me that Kanye West is that fucking stupid that he doesn't know that George Floyd thing was staged? Or is he going to come around to that point of view if we wait long enough? Is that it?
I don't think so. I think they're too insulated. If all they have to go off of is what they see on CNN, and they're not digging into alternative media, then they may never arrive at the right conclusions. And the best he can come up with, the best he arrives at, is the idea that it was fentanyl. And he clearly got that from Candace Owens' documentary, because he's hanging out with
Right.
Candace Owen, and she arrived at that
Right.
as well. And I look at the fentanyl overdose as the guardrail that prevents
Yes.
somebody from seeing that it was a fake death and he died 3 years prior, if anything.
Right. Right. There's another guardrail I've heard that he died of AIDS, but I don't know how exactly that functions as a guardrail, but I've been hearing it. Or that he had AIDS, maybe. In any case.
He had COVID, reportedly, but I
Right,
don't think
so
he was wearing a mask.
Right, and here's where you maybe differ from fakeologist, because he jumped right in and said, "Oh no, of course they've cued him in. He knows the script and he's following the script. He knows it was fake, but he's not going to expose it as fake because he's in on it." That's what the fakeologist isn't fooled for one moment by Kanye West pretending not to know any better, because Kanye West gets around. He's got his contacts. He gets around. How could he know less about this than you and me?
You know what? You know what will be the ultimate tell? The ultimate tell will be this. He's been in talks since March to go into space to do a music release party with Musk. And he said he's not going to settle for 4 minutes in space. He's going to want to be up there for hours. Which means if Kanye goes to space, then he's a total insider because he's going to be dangling from a cord in front of a green screen. He'll know. So that's the ultimate test.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's going to be the test.
I hadn't heard he was involved in any way with the space fraud.
He's friends with Musk, and at his cult schools, he talks about how they teach rocket science now to the children. And yeah, he's been in talks to go into space, and that tells me.
All right, so let's establish this for all your listeners, because I know there are some who really have an inside track on the whole hip-hop scene. Kanye West is a prostitute. Is that correct?
He's a visionary, a billionaire, a fashion mogul. But you know what? He's in the mass media entertainment complex, which is basically a prostitute. It is for the government.
Yeah, you're sort of wavering. You think these people brainwash themselves into bullshit?
Look, he's intergenerational mind controlled. His father is Black Panthers, and here he is resurrecting a lot of that angst and polarizing speech from then, and using BLM. And BLM, of course, is the replacement for the Black Panthers. But just the fact that his father was high up in media in the Atlanta newspapers as a photographer and a Black Panther member makes me think that, yeah, he may actually be more in the know than not, given that it's...
Like Tupac.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Tupac.
Exactly. They both have that in their backgrounds.
Yeah, by the way, Akil the MC, as you know, has made videos claiming he's not Tupac for quite a while, actually, for quite a few years, I think. So I'm just adding that in parenthetically. This really, let me tell you why it infuriates me. Because I can go out there, I can look at a photograph, I can look at the original video that ostensibly shows Officer Derek Chauvin with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, and then I can look at the mugshot of the Derek Chauvin who was arrested and who appeared in court, and clearly see that the one in the video is not only not the same actor, but is like 10 to 20 years older than the one who played the role in court. And no one is going to convince me that Kanye West can't get to that material as easily as I can, or that no one's pointed this out to him. So I'm more and more inclined to agree with fakeologists that Kanye West is in on this shit, and that makes him a prostitute to me.
Well, if he
That makes him
pays,
a lying whore.
if he
That
pays
he won't
damages,
say,
but like Alex Jones, for example, here he is about to lose $275 trillion. More, There's like I don't even think there's $275 trillion worth of super male vitality and protein pills and everything else that he sells, and there's no way that you could be liable for that much money, and you're not going to just unravel the whole thing and call it out for what it is. So he's taking a hit, and we'll see. It looks to me like, yeah, you'd have to be complicit at some level here.
well, we already know Alex. Yeah, we already know Alex Jones is a whore because Alex Jones sold out the 9/11 Truth Movement when he jumped into bed with Trump. But we know that. You know, Alex Jones was a guy who essentially made his name on 9/11 being an inside job and a controlled demolition. He spent years talking about that. And then suddenly he didn't want to say anything about it. And he didn't even ask Donald Trump about it when Trump came on his show. And Alex Jones, we know, is a fucking whore from the word over and over and over and over again. So Alex Jones being prostituted and controlled and scripted, that's a no-brainer. But Kanye West, I don't know. You know, I'm looking at him. I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? What's going on? Can he see what I see? All he's got to do is go out there and look at those photographs. All he's got to do is read that officially published statement in the press by
Well, look,
attorney
the
Timothy.
bigger picture, though, would also include that Kanye is likely an intergenerational Satanist, for lack of a better term. Because if you look at his ritual performances where he burns himself or he has himself like Christ and he does the Easter service and he hangs out with the Satanist and they're hailing the return of Pluto, these events are too well timed and the symbolism is too well integrated into the bigger media picture that, no, if anything, he's on the dark side. He's not going to just
You
wait.
realize,
Yeah.
this guy's last 10 albums have been like number one.
He has more
And they're not
top
all that
40s
good
than
either.
Elvis, bigger than Elvis, and he said he would be. And check this out.
And
This is weird, but that new Elvis movie that just came out, the director was blasting the song, the Kanye song, Black Skinhead, before every dance scene, before every music scene, to hype up the actors. I mean, there's some kind of weirdness going on, and it's too
wait a
well
minute,
scripted.
the Elvis movie featured music. I haven't watched it.
Now, it didn't
featured.
feature Kanye's music, but when they were preparing to perform Elvis music, they would blast Black Skinhead. And the director talked
For the
about this.
crew and
For the
for the
crew.
crew and the actors and all that.
And I have to wonder why. You know what I mean? Why would you even mention that? And the song's title, Black Skinhead, contains KKK twice. And I'm just saying, this is all an indication that Kanye is an inside player. And whether he's totally in the know about how fake things are, he's certainly in the PSYOP entertainment complex.
How stupid could he be not to be in the know?
I don't think it's about
I mean, come
stupidity
on, how
so
stupid
much
would he
as
have to be not?
I don't think it's stupidity so much as insulation, because I don't know anybody that even looks that deep. And if you're involved in his world, he's surrounded by handlers. And he said that when the Uvalde shooting happened, he thought the people at the Gap knew about it in advance, and he felt like he was in the Truman Show. So this
Right.
leads me to think that at some level he's got to be blinkered. It's not about being necessarily I guess anything other than being blinkered.
There's no. What? You're telling me he's not even streetwise?
Well, I don't know anybody.
Mr. Big Shot, Mr. Big Shit rapper ain't even streetwise. Is
Well,
that what you're telling me?
I'm saying that most people aren't. Like, for example, if you go to any mass media company, go to Fox News, go to any newsroom, even though they're publishing psyops and running psyops, only the people high up enough on the pyramid would have a clue. And the irony of it is that those of us they call conspiracy theorists and crazy know more than they do, than the reporters know.
I just refuse to accept that because they can't be doing it over and over and over again, and these people not catching on to what's happening. They'd have to be willfully blind. They'd have to put their hands over their eyes not to see that. Well,
do you agree with what he said
we're
about?
back-
He said that the Jewish media mafia controls entertainment and has historically controlled every major artist, and that he wants to break away from that, and then he gets kicked out of the bank. And I mean, do you agree with his assessment on some
Oh,
level? Is he
oh,
speaking? Is he?
yeah, yeah. I mean, in that sense, yeah, he's definitely. You know, you begin to wonder here because when he said, the Jewish media, I thought, well, that's not really the best choice of words, dude. You could have phrased it a little bit differently. Was that just spontaneous on your part to use the phrase Jewish media, or have you been scripted to actually use that phrase
And
to
yeah,
make it?
he was asked about this by Chris Cuomo and Piers Morgan, and he doubled down. He won't even back off when he's accused of being racist. His excuse is, well, blacks are Jews. Boom. Gotcha. So
Oh,
he's
right,
ran with
right.
this though.
Blacks are
But
Jews. That's
my
right.
point is he's been platformed to espouse views that get every white nationalist, every kind of Hitler sympathizer kicked off the web, and yet and they say he's banned on Twitter and Instagram, but everybody's talking about it. I'm just saying it's ironic that yeah
Well, they're promoting him.
they
They're
are
promoting it.
he's living out the black skinhead script that
No one would have even. No one would have even. That's the thing. Unless who would be paying attention to what some hip hop artist said? Whatever crap comes out of his mouth, who would be paying attention? But it's all over the media. It's all they're talking about. So that means they're promoting what he's saying, and it just.
look, it's so incestuous
God,
when you look
we
at all
got
the
some
characters.
really, I'm
Look,
telling you, these people in the entertainment industry, they're real motherfuckers.
well, look, it's a small club. You look at the fact that he's got this breaking up of his family. He blames on Hollywood and Pete Davidson, who moved in on his now wife or soon-to-be ex-wife. But
He married into the Kardashian. Well, some Owen Benjamin is absolutely right about this. See, this is where Owen Benjamin is absolutely right. And he said, as soon as this shit started, as soon as Kanye came out with that very, very first, statement, Owen Benjamin put out one where he said, don't insult our intelligence. You married into the Kardashians. You married Kim Kardashian, who initially became famous because her own mother marketed a porno film with her in it. That's how she made her name. So don't pretend, when you get up there and whine about how, they're taking your children away from you and they're sexualizing your children, don't pretend you didn't know what you got into and now you're the innocent victim. None of us believe that. So, I'm with Owen Benjamin on that. I'm not taking any crap from Kanye like he doesn't know, like, I didn't know. I was
what's interesting
manipulated.
too
What
is
an arrogant prick he is. What an arrogant prick he is anyway. Like, where the fuck have you been, dude, the last 10 years while all this crap was going on? You suddenly discovered that the Jewish media was in control. Is that right? Like, that's original on your part? I can't.
But look,
This is
he's got huge fans. I have anti-fans like Goyim TV. They hate me because they think I defend Israel because I don't talk about it, and they think I'm defending Jews because I don't care about it. But
yeah, that's a funny thing. Let me nail that.
but,
Let me hone in
but I
on
want to say
that a
this though.
second
I want to
because
say really quick. Goyim TV is praising Kanye. They're totally behind him, and I'm like,
right,
because he's saying what they can't say without getting silenced. It's just kind of
right.
ironic.
He's acting as a proxy for them. That's what he's doing. He's making himself a proxy for the people who don't give a fuck about fakeology. All they want to do is hate on Jews,
Right.
which
Exactly.
may or may not be, which may or may not be valid. They're entitled to hate Jews if they. I don't know. It's like they know when they say Jews, it's such a broad category. They're throwing some ordinary dipshit Jew, low class Jew, in with the rich and the powerful ones, which right away makes them out to be bigots, right? Like every Jew is in on this.
Right, they want to
Most Jews don't.
they want to reduce any kind of conjecture that's not mainstream into hate or racism. And like I don't categorize people that way, the media does. We're decategorizing things. We're deconstructing their
We're
constructs.
more about individuals. We're about defending the right
Precisely.
of the individual to.
But then Kanye comes out with White Lives Matter and with Candace Owens, who again is married to the CEO of Parler, and he's buying Parler. So he goes out there flaunting what the ADL has already labeled as a white power thing. And I'm just saying this is so scripted. He's definitely
This is manipulative. This is so manipulative. It really proves my my fundamental thesis that the greatest weapon the deep state has is shallowness.
Shallowness.
People's shallowness. They're unwilling. You referred to it as visual, a lack of visual literacy, or an inability to, to think logically past past a sequence of more than 2 or 3 events. Just this whole, I'm not even going to take a second look at it. I'm not even going to think about it. It takes me back to 9/11 again. It really does, because 9/11 was in your face. It was in your face, those controlled demolitions. Building 7, that came out. Excuse me, that came out, and people couldn't deny that was. So no one had any excuse at that point. Yet they continued to cling to this idea that planes crashed into the towers, and
They never did explain that, and to me, that may have been intentional. Maybe that I just egregious gaslighting is what does the psychological damage. I mean, I've done some research on psychological trauma, emotional abuse, the possible causes for schizophrenic breaks, etc. And one of the causes, if you look at the work of Dr. Gregory Bateson, is gaslighting, where the person who's being lied to doesn't have any kind of recourse except to go with the lies, even though they know it's not true. And that's
right. That's the thing about 9/11. No, maybe no one knew what exactly happened. Were there planes? Were there not planes? Did this happen? Did that happen? But they knew it was all a big fat lie. They knew that much, and yet they backed away from that and just fell right in line. They rolled over for it, and that's a nation of cowards. That's cowardice, being unwilling to acknowledge what's right in front of you.
Well, that could be victim blaming, victim shaming, because we're talking about people with Stockholm Syndrome, a captive audience born into an intergenerational cult. Their parents were brainwashed, their grandparents were brainwashed, duck and cover for the nukes, duck and cover for the guns, and now the children of those who were raised fearing guns are going to be born in bubbles because of monkey AIDS or monkey pox or whatever. They are
that's
escalating.
The duck and cover for COVID. Duck and cover for COVID.
Oh yeah, that
right?
does work
that's
actually.
Big one.
In fact, it does work, I think. I've seen the signs.
I know it works. I know it works. I can prove it works because every day this week that I was out, I see people in their cars wearing masks. It's the craziest thing. People in their cars with the windows rolled up wearing masks. Who would do that? Why would? Do they like wearing the mask? Is it a fetish?
You know what? I was thinking about this too. It's a religious garment. It's also a political statement, and it's about self-righteousness, but I think it's a political statement. It's really fashion as a weapon. And this is where I think Kanye is interesting, because he's a fashion mogul here. And we're talking about the role of media figures in mind control. And what sold 2020 more than anything, what implemented their fascist agenda more than anything than the mask. They used fashion to enforce conformity to their political ideology, and it was almost impossible to not have to conform because it's right there on the faces. And I just see them as basically expressing their political views.
It's so. I mean, even the president declared the pandemic is over, right? The president declared the pandemic is over. Why would you still be wearing a mask if that's the case? You're right. It's a whole mindset. It's got nothing to do with anything real. But they must want to reinforce it, because this week they've got an interview with the doctor who is the number 2 at Peter Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance. Those are the ones that laundered the CIA money to set up the lab in Wuhan, together with Anthony Fauci. And the email correspondence between Fauci and Peter Daszak has been exposed that indicates that they were running around in the first few weeks of the in March of January, February of 2020, trying to completely suppress any idea that this came out of the Wuhan lab. And their correspondence shows that was the whole. They were managing the narrative so that no one would say it came out of the Wuhan lab, or that could be dismissed as a conspiracy theory or totally crazy. And instead it came from, as you say, bat soup, or, the Wuhan fish market, or some ridiculous story.
That's the
Well,
only story that,
now,
yeah, they stuck with that for the most part. But yeah, the Wuhan thing, whether it's Wuhan or lab, the story's kind of, to me, it's interchangeable. It just assumes the pandemic model is real. And that's my main dispute. I believe in the weather. I don't believe in climate change. I believe people get sick and there may be contagions, but I don't believe the pandemic model because it's just too useful for authoritarians. And look how it's been used. I mean, COVID's the new climate change. They just fast track their controls. It's amazing.
yeah, this guy, he's given an interview in which he supposedly is blowing the whistle on gain of function research at the Wuhan lab and the fact that they knew it was bioweapons research. Now, why would that? And that's within the last couple, like on the 19th, he did that interview, and he sent a letter to the Congress and the Senate. And I don't know if he actually ended up testifying or not, whether they've called him, but he presumably at some point he would testify in the Congress that yes, indeed, this was a bioweapon. They were doing gain of function research, bioweapons research in the Wuhan lab. And I asked myself, who the hell signed off on bioweapons research, United States bioweapons research? I assume it would be highly classified and controlled, done in Wuhan, China, under the oversight and direction of the Chinese Communist Party. Who would have signed off on such a thing? It's insane. What was that lab even doing in China if they were doing anything at all related to bioweapons research? And gain of function research is bioweapons. And that means it had to be signed off on by the Pentagon, by Fort Detrick, that the United States military allowed gain of function research, which is the development of a bioweapon, the ability to take something that supposedly exists in nature and weaponize it, make it dangerous, take something that ordinarily is either maybe a mild annoyance or not even harmful and weaponize it. In China, in communist fucking China. How is that possible? The mere fact that they've gotten away with that is enough to tell you that the whole thing is crazy. It's crazy. And that leaves me with the question, do they have bioweapons or is that all fake?
Well, based on the video footage I saw of people dropping dead in Wuhan,
Well, then
I
we
would
know
say
that was
fake.
fake.
Well, if that was fake, then why would any else be real? If the very first domino that was pushed, that tipped, was fake, why do we assume all the subsequent dominoes are real? And that's one
Well,
of the.
I'm asking about the prior dominoes. I'm asking about a 50-year history of scaring us with the prospect of bioweapons in the same way that we were terrorized with the prospect of nuclear weapons. Same way. Bioweapons are also referred to as weapons of mass destruction. That was one of the claims against Saddam
Correct.
Hussein that justified the invasion of Iraq, that he had bioweapons as well, and they presented evidence of that. So, this is a real,
I think it's like this.
obviously.
They have these things that are big terrors, and bioweapons, it's like a reset button. And it's the same programming with nukes. My area in the Army was nuclear, biological, chemical, and they grouped these together. The nuke threat, fallouts, biological, and then chemical, synthetic, just chemical warfare, which, again, these are three big threats, three big areas, I think, of the mind war. And they need us to believe that at any moment, somebody could be carrying something in their person that could destroy us all. Or somebody has a suitcase that can press a button and wipe out a city. I think this is just big war. And the alternative explanation of the bioweapons lab makes a lot more sense to be politically divisive and make it left and right than to have it fake. Kind of like radical Islam. I don't believe radical
Well,
Islam exists the way they presented it, but they invented it and they gave us a
we
scapegoat.
we've been told in only the past week that Boston University, a lab at Boston University, has transformed the COVID virus. I guess they said the same alleged virus, COVID virus, into something that is 80% fatal. You've seen this story, right? They really were running it out in the media. And people are saying, what the hell's going on? You're right. All the right-wing AM talk radio hosts are having in hysterics over this. Like, well, what the hell is Boston University doing trying to take COVID and make it 80% fatal? But you're right. That's just a psyop. We don't know what they did, do we?
Well, you know what they're saying too? They're saying in Florida, and this is gloating. This is how you know the left is psychotic. The left is saying that more Republicans are dying in Florida than Democrats, and they're saying it's because of vax hesitancy. In other words, they're vax refuseniks, so they're dying in greater numbers. And they're saying higher death rates among the GOP. And these are all recent stories in Florida. And I'm like, they're not. It's just like they're gloating. It's like, see, I
How would they
told you
know
so.
that? How would they know? They're checking the political affiliation of everybody that gets sick and dies. Is that it?
Yes.
That's total crap.
NPR pointed this out. Pro-Trump counties have higher COVID rates, but now, like Florida Bulldog and NBC said, COVID rates are higher among Republicans than Democrats, and they're blaming it specifically on vax hesitancy. And it's
On the
amazing.
other hand, we're getting constant reports of people who are getting sick and dying from the vax. Another football a lineman down at Mississippi State, 19 years old, big prospect for the NFL, I guess, dropped dead suddenly over the weekend. But they won't tell you why. See, this leads me to, and now they want to. Apparently, the CDC just voted to add the COVID vaccine to the list of, I don't know, 24 others that they pump into little kids when they go to school. And so the reaction to that is people are saying, well, just pull your kids out of the school. Do you really believe that a majority of American parents are going to allow their kid? They're not going to be thinking twice now
Yeah, look,
about.
I know people on both sides of this thing, and I'm not really on a side necessarily, but I know people who are total conformists, and they really do drink the Kool-Aid. They inject the Kool-Aid. There's no doubt, there's no skepticism, there's no worries. In fact, it's the opposite. They're terrified until they get it. Like the same anxiety that the vax hesitant has towards the needle, they have towards being unvaccinated. They actually
I
feel that.
know.
It's
I know.
gonna go
I know.
by
I
swimmingly.
ran into this myself. On Thursday. I went for my medical, went to see my doctor's appointment up there at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center, and the doctor, who I've gotten to know fairly well, he's sort of a young guy. They're managing hypertension with me, and they're trying this and trying that. Even though I'm in good shape, I run out, I jog, I work out. I get into the gym and do a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm in pretty good shape. But, they were getting hypertension readings for the last couple years. And finally, I capitulated and gave in because they said you're going to have a stroke if you don't do something about this high blood pressure. Of course, I'm convinced the high blood pressure is what a fucked up environment we're living in with all these stupid fucking people that make me so angry. That's really why I have high blood pressure. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah,
But this,
you're likely having a natural response, and most people have been rendered apathetic. If the gaslighting doesn't
yes,
work on you, you're going to have that resistance to it, I think.
yeah,
Hypertension, yeah, we don't want to have that, but it's not like it's random. It's not like that doesn't have a cause that you can discern.
right. And so I went to this is great because when I checked in at the desk, they always, your name, your birth date, your address, and then they had a new question. What race do you prefer to be what race do you prefer to be identified as? She actually asked me that. What race do you prefer to be? I said, well, I don't know about you, but I belong to the human race. I said, are we going to get into gender pronouns now too? And the clerk behind the desk, right away, she smiled and she laughed. She said, I know. She said, they just give us these questions to ask. But that's a heads up here. That's the Johns Hopkins institutions injecting race into medical care as if it mattered.
And could you have
As if,
chosen anything and they would have gone with it? Like, was that your
yeah.
your in? You could have been
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point. I could have said, I'm black.
You're
Even though
you're black
I got
African
blue
American
eyes.
male. Right. And what would they be able to say? You got Rachel Dozenel, you got Sean King. They've already set the precedent that reality's fluid.
Reality is fluid. So then, I went in for the my examination and all that, and it turned out my blood pressure was really weird. The nurse took it at first, and it was 155 over 97. 10 minutes later, they took it again. It was 133 over like 96. I said, what the hell does this measurement mean? If your blood pressure can drop more than 20 points in the space of 10 minutes, what is that reading worth? And her response was, well, we always do 2 readings because when people come in here for their exam, they're nervous. They call that white coat hypertension. As soon as you see the white coats and the blue coats, you get nervous, and so you're hypertensive. But anyway, the doctor came in. He's asking me this and asking me that. And they're talking about diet, and we'll try this, we'll try that, blah, 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 blah. At the very end, but he was happy. He was happy that my blood pressure was 133 over 96. He said, we need to bring the second number down a little bit, but, And I thought to myself, my God, it's like a roll of the dice. It's a roll of the dice. But then guess, colonoscopy, you're going to go for a colonoscopy. Have you seen you should see an optometrist, get your eyes, I'm 71 years old, so they're running down the checklist of all the things that a senior citizen is supposed to do. And at the very, very end, he says, I noticed he was really hesitant about this. He says, well, would you like, to have, he said, would you like vaccinations? Something along those lines, or he didn't say, how do you feel about vaccinations, or it might have been, how do you feel about, your vaccinations? And I looked right at him. I said, the last flu shot I got was in 1976, which I think was probably before he was born. And that was the famous swine flu debacle where Gerald Ford, the president, went on TV and got the shot. At the time, I was living in Philadelphia. I didn't have much money, and I thought, well, I don't want to come down with the flu, so I went and I got it. They gave it to you with like a staple gun. I don't think they use those things anymore. But this 1976 swine flu debacle, Mike Wallace did like 20 minutes on the show 60 Minutes back in the 80s, I guess. It was a big scandal because a lot of the people that got that shot ended up with Guillain-Barré syndrome and got really sick. And so they yanked that vaccine. The 19. They don't want anybody to remember this, that the 1976 swine flu debacle ended up with the vaccine actually being pulled and withdrawn.
Yeah,
and
that
people
I
getting
haven't
sick
heard
from
that
it.
mentioned very often. It seems like that would be on the tip of their tongue. So we got to tell you, the last time we recommended something with the president getting it on TV, it turned out this way. They seem to leave that part out. I haven't heard about this debacle, the swine flu
It's
debacle.
really weird how they erase. You can get out there on YouTube and find that interview that Mike Wallace did with all the experts, and they're like, they're hemming and hawing, and well, how do you explain it? Well, what about this and what about that? And did you really test? The whole thing all over again. And I laughed when I said that. I said, yeah, the last one. I said, and I don't get the flu. I don't think I've ever had the flu in my life. How do you know if you have the flu? What is it like? I said, it is a cold. He said, well, no, you get fever, you get headaches, you get joint pains. Well, I don't have that. I might have had a cold once in a while, every few years or so, a cold, but I've never had the flu. I don't know what the flu is. I don't know what they're calling the flu, but people must get it. But anyway, I said, yeah, the last flu shot I got was 76. I said, and you remember what happened with that, don't you? And he kind of looked, he said, he was trying to, he was jogging his memory. I said, well, that was a disaster. I said, so I've never taken a flu shot since. I said, and frankly, I said, there are plenty of doctors out there that don't have a very high opinion of the process through which this vaccine was created. And a lot of people don't even believe that the COVID is real. They think guys just hijacked the flu numbers.
That's got to be new. In all the different outbreaks and epidemics we've had, until this pandemic, you've always had vax skeptics, and you've always had people who had, oh, the government's doing it or whatever, but you didn't have outright denial of the very existence of viruses up until, I think, this latest one. Like, despite all the obvious brainwashed victims with the face diapers, I think there's a bigger presence now of radical skepticism that takes things back far enough.
God, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. because I got to tell you, this doctor, he backed down right. He said, okay, he really got off that. I think he asked me. He said, well, have you ever had a tetanus shot? I said, well, yeah, sure. I had an infected cat bite about 12 years ago, and I had to go to the hospital. It was pretty bad. I had cellulitis climbing up my arm, and I was scared. I said, and they shot me up with everything they had there until they managed to get it under control. I was in there about a week. It's kind of scary if you've ever had an infected animal bite. And cats, I think, like 95% of the time, cat bites end up with some kind of infection. I don't know why that is. Dog bites is no big deal. People get bit by dogs all the time and nothing happens because dogs must be a lot cleaner. But a cat bite can be bad. So yeah, I'm sure I got a tetanus shot that time, but I haven't had one since. And I said, and of course, I was induced to take the shingles shot about, I guess it's been about 5 years. That one was called Zostervax. And I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And once a year I was going to see the doctor. Once a year for my physical. And I was there, and he said, "Oh, we've got the shingles vaccine right here. I got the nurse. You can take it right now. It won't be." I said, "All right." I gave in. I capitulated, and I got the shot. The name of the vaccine was Zostervax. So 3-4 years pass. I'm back in there with him again. This is a couple years back. This is about 3 years ago. And he says, well, we have another shingles vaccine. Shingles apparently is a big problem among senior citizens, I guess. A lot of them get it. So I said, wait a minute. I said, I already got your shingles vaccine, didn't I? A few years back. And he said, yeah, well, this is a new one. This is a better one, or this is another one. It's called Shingrix. I said, whoa. I put my hand up, and I said, wait a minute, Doc. I said, you're telling me that the original one I got wasn't good enough, and now they got a whole new vaccine for shingles that I got to take? I said, pardon my skepticism, but I don't think I'm going to go for that. Because that means I can't trust the one you gave me originally. That was supposed to protect me against shingles. Now you're telling me I need a whole new one to protect me from shingles?
So the moving of the goalpost, that's, I think, what gets people. I mean, the media is so dismissive of the real skepticism. I'm skeptical of anything that's overly politicized. You don't see them politicizing tetanus shots in the same way. And everybody's eyes are on this.
But who knows? Yeah, who knows what a tetanus shot is? I was reading an extended discussion of this by the, I'm really into the anti-vax people, all the people who are adamantly opposed to the vaccines and think they're dangerous, think their kids have got autism. I'm really into reading that stuff. And this one analysis basically exposed the fact that the tetanus shot, if you went to the hospital for let's say you stepped on a rusty nail and you went to the hospital for it, or maybe an animal bite, and you went to the hospital for a tetanus shot, it's a completely different tetanus shot than the one you might have had last year, the year before that, because there's something called the Tdap, and then there's the MTdap, and in other words, they got a dozen different variations of this thing. So how would you know which one to take? So and she said, if you have to go to the hospital and they offer you a tetanus shot, ask them these questions so you'll know just which tetanus shot they're giving you. Well, if you got to do that, why do it at all? It's a roll of the dice. It's a roll of the dice. And they've turned this roll of the dice into something that has brainwashed people into thinking that they're protected against sickness.
And that the unprotected, this is the part that got us in 2020, I think, the most. One of the things we often brought up was, why do they have such a problem with the people who aren't protected if they're protected? What does it matter to them?
Exactly. Why
it's like our prophylactic won't work unless everybody else uses it at the same time. Then it's not a real thing. It's not a collective salvation thing unless it's a religion. And that's why I've said this thing's got to be a religious programming system where they want a dichotomy between the saved and the unsaved, and they want to play off of that and weaponize the saved.
Yeah, you're right. It's a religious ritual. It's a sacrament. The vaccine is a sacrament for sure, and the mask is a vestment. And the social distancing is penance, right, for your sins, and it's all religion. That's all it is in there, and they're putting a white coat on it, priests in white coats, and they want to turn the whole medical profession into a bunch of basically, archdeacons and priests. That's what they want to do, so that you won't know if science. It would have nothing to do with science anymore. I got to say one more thing though. When I was having this discussion with the doctor the other day, and I politely I explained to him why I didn't believe in vaccines anymore and why I was skeptical and what my experience had been with that 76 alleged swine flu shot. I couldn't let it go without expressing, because he was in there and he had an assistant in there on a computer screen, some kind of nurse in training. And I turned to both of them and I said, well, you guys had no choice. You had to take it, didn't you? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah, we have to take all that stuff. We don't have any choice. And that just ended the discussion right there. Because what else are you going to say? Like, here I am saying I have the freedom to choose, but you don't. I have the freedom to, and I actually went on, I added something to that. I said, it really bothers me. You two are both trained medical professionals, and you know your personal health profiles better than anyone. Aren't you equipped intellectually by education and training to decide for yourself whether a vaccine is for you or not, whether anything is for you or not? You're a doctor. You're a nurse. No authority should be able to tell you that you've got to take this vaccine when you know your own personal health history. There may be a reason why something is contraindicated. You may have issues with blood clots. There could be any number of highly individual health issues that you have that would argue against getting a vaccine. It's interesting because I think some of my relatives are coming around to this because we're discussing what this really comes down to is animal vaccinations. That's how this really got off the ground. By law, you are required to vaccinate your dog and your cat for
Now,
rabies and distemper.
is that something that's opposed by any anti-vaxxers anywhere? Like stop vaccinating your pets, or is that not an
There
issue?
are definitely the people, the real radical skeptics who deconstructed this and who say that the whole model, the whole infectious model that they're selling is false, do refuse to get their animals vaccinated and run into a lot of trouble over it. But you're right. Most people, but here's the thing. Family member said, this is an exchange we had on Facebook. I'm trying to remember the exact discussion we were having about this, but she said, oh, yeah, we had this dog. When we had this dog, she was talking about a pet dog they had they had for many years and then had died and all that. When she got sick, we decided not to get her this or that vaccine because she had this or that. In other words, here she was explaining to me a case where they decided not to vaccinate the dog, and I don't know what the particular vaccine was, but they decided not to get this particular vaccine for the dog because the dog had certain individual health issues that might have been contraindicated by the vaccine. Vaccines cause inflammation. They do things because they got metals in them and everything else. And I thought, well, this is interesting because she was really, in a way, empathizing with my even though she took the COVID vax, and I think she took both of them. She said, it was funny. She said her husband was going to get him first and see if he had any problems, and if he didn't have any problems, then she was going to get him. I'll bet there are a lot of people that are doing it that way. I'll bet there's one member of the family who says, okay, I'm going to take this, and if nothing goes wrong, you guys should go get it too.
Now listen to this.
You
A commenter, Ms. L, says she even refused fluoride treatment for her dog when he got his teeth cleaned and was treated like crap by the doctor
Oh, yeah.
after.
Yeah, I won't let the dentist do any kind of fluoride treatment on me, and they don't push it as much anymore. I noticed they used to actually really push it. They used to put this stuff, this flavored stuff in a form and stick it in your mouth, and you'd have to bite down for a minute or two. And now you got fluoride protection. And that was never, first of all, that was never the claim for fluoride anyway. The claim for water fluoridation the claim for fluoride was it helped in creating harder teeth for children. Children. There was never any claim that once you were a fully grown adult that your teeth could be strengthened by fluoride, but they started trying to sell that too.
Yeah, they make it sound
And
like the fluoridated water will fill in all the caries and cavities, and it's like, okay, they did change that a bit. They say it's a preventative. I haven't seen a lot of literature on it. I mean, but the fact is, they're saying that the poison's in the dosage and there's not enough, and it's not this. I've heard all of it, but the basic
yeah,
premise, the theory though, is that they're putting something in there to what? Soften our minds?
you know, I've heard that. I really have. I've heard that claim that what fluoride's really about is destroying the pineal gland. And you must have seen that. There's a lot of
That's
people out there that
that's the
believe
main
that.
line on it. It's like it's not just
It
that it chills.
calcifies. It causes calcification of the pineal
Yes,
gland. That's
if
the
if it
claim.
was just like if it was just something that would chill you out, yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go home after work and have a glass of fluoridated water. But no, the claim is that it's calcifying your pineal gland, which is very insidious. It make you paranoid. Don't drink the water.
Yeah, yeah. And once again, coming back to this question of animal vaccinations, if the whole pseudoscience behind vaccinations it is going to be challenged, sooner or later you're going to have to challenge at the animal level. Because if you won't take the vax, well, why are you vaccinating your dog or your cat, your beloved pet? Why are you potentially endangering your beloved pet? And they're still making the claim that basically they always insist on you got to get a license and everything. You got a dog, it's got to be licensed, and if it isn't, you can be fined. And now, where I live in this county, cats too have to be licensed, and like vets don't question it at all. And what am I going to do? I can't get this vet to treat my cat or my dog unless I agree to him vaccinating them. I had a very good veterinarian, very dedicated, made house calls. Or too many vets that make house. This guy's got a mobile clinic, and he makes house calls. And he's an old guy. Probably should be retired by now.
We know.
But
Speaking of this, the first dog that died of COVID was a 17-year-old Pomeranian. You know what 17 is in dog years? 119. And that
no
number's
dog,
yeah.
no dog lives that long. That's ridiculous. That's a dog that lives a long, long time.
Well, they said it was COVID. I remember like this has got to be a joke. Like the dog that died on 9/11, we have a dog that died from 3/11, the first COVID death.
Well, we
And
know the diagnosis of COVID is bullshit anyway because we know the PCR is total crap. But here's another one. Apparently, they won't let you get a mammogram, which is a breast examination, and which is another highly questionable diagnostic procedure. Some people think it's potentially dangerous. Others think it does detect growths, in the mammary gland. I mean, it is, I had never gotten a mammogram, and finally I got talked into it a year ago because you have to. And I figured, well, what can it do? What's the worst that's going to happen? But apparently, if you've been, they won't do mammograms if you've been vaccinated within the last month, I think. Apparently, I'm reading this in many places. The COVID vaccine, I don't think they said this about vaccines in general, because I didn't hear this about the flu vaccine, but they are saying that the COVID vaccine makes it impossible to get an accurate reading from a mammogram because it simulates the appearance of cancer. This is out there now. And that, radiologists are refusing to give mammograms to people who've just been vaccinated with the COVID vaccine, and instead of telling them, wait a month or wait 2 months and come back for this, because it compromises the results of the mammogram. Now, what does
Interesting.
that
I
tell you?
haven't heard that. Haven't heard that. But nothing would surprise me at this point. I'd have to say here though that the idea of the virus itself, in my view, is more like a replacement for an older system of control. It doesn't even matter if it exists. It doesn't matter because if people accept the premise, they behave as though. I mean, climate change obviously doesn't exist, but look how
Yeah,
it's shaping
that's
our
the
world.
fake aspect of it. That's the fake aspect of it. But the real ology behind it is somebody like me, 71 years old, and who knows what can go wrong. There's all kinds of health issues that start to show up as you age. Um, I can't trust the medical system at all. I always was a little bit skeptical. I wouldn't do anything they told me to do. Like I said, I started to become skeptical about vaccines probably like I say, after that 76 flu shot, I said, I'm not taking another one of these. I said, you mean to tell me they just yanked this thing after giving it to millions of people and claim that it's making people Guillain-Barré syndrome from it? And then when it's investigated by 60 Minutes, they find out they didn't really test it, and they covered up the numbers of side effects, and they didn't talk about the mice that died and all that. So it's interesting to consider the fact that since 1976, I wouldn't even think about taking a flu shot because I remember that event. It was a big deal at the time. They've wiped it out of people's memory. They really have. They've wiped it out of historical memory. We live in the United States of amnesia. No one remembers anything. They don't remember the Vietnam War. They won't remember Iraq soon enough. They don't remember anything, people.
You know what
In
they don't
America,
do? They don't even know what they're arguing in favor of or what they're defending. The people who are happy that Alex Jones is being hit with $2 trillion, they don't even know the truth about the event. They're just arguing from the chorus that the media presents, and there's very little fact checking. They do
yeah,
exist in a bubble.
I saw Alex Jones interviewed on this clown Steven Crowder. I don't know who this guy is. I've never watched him. The only reason the only reason I know who he is because Owen Benjamin used to work for Steven Crowder and has some very unflattering things to say
Oh,
about him.
interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was connected to Crowder. That's an interesting
Oh yeah, yeah.
insight.
You should go back and yeah. Owen Benjamin has a lot to say about Crowder. He really does. And Crowder has this podcast called Louder with Crowder. Is that right?
Yeah, he's the one who created the meme. Something something changed my mind, and you know, sitting on a desk with a piece of with a cup of coffee. That's allowed with Crowder. He's kind of been replaced by Alex Stein on the world stage as far as being the annoying right-wing clown.
Well, Alex Stein's a lot more entertaining than Steven Crowder. But here I am watching Alex Jones. This is within the last couple weeks. Alex Jones interviewed, a very sympathetic interview by Steven Crowder. And as you say, the line that people like Steven Crowder are taking is, well, it doesn't matter whether, in other words, it doesn't matter what really happened at Sandy Hook. What's important is that they're attacking your free speech. Or they're trying to shut you down because maybe you doubted that you had doubts about this. You had skeptics. I had to watch how Crowder danced around this because I'm thinking to myself, what's the elephant in the podcast here? The elephant
Yeah,
in the living room.
yeah, exactly.
The elephant in the living room is, look, guys, did people die at Sandy Hook? Was it real or not? Was it real or fake? But no, they won't go near that.
Well, let me ask you
They
this:
won't go near that.
$73 million was paid over from Armalite to the Sandy Hook clan. 73 million. Don't you think that if someone's going to lose 73 million, they would at least investigate some of the claims that would utterly undermine the opposition's claim
What
on
about
that
the
money?
insurance? It's like asking about the insurance companies on 9/11. The alleged passengers on the flight and the payout, insurance company payouts for 9/11. What about the insurance payout to Larry Silverstein for the destruction of that entire complex, which was very conveniently done without think about how much it would have cost him to remove the asbestos and the toxics that were, those buildings went up starting in like 1970, so they were full of asbestos and stuff. It would have cost him millions to get that. Instead, they were able to demolish them and everybody got to breathe that stuff, for a few hours. But you ask, yes, hey, look, that's a reality breakdown. The money is the reality breakdown because, you mean, Remington or Armalite is going to take responsibility for every time somebody gets shot, or they're going to give up money for,
Well, I'm just saying that the amount of money there would presuppose that they would want to ensure that they actually owed that money. I'm not going to pay someone $10,000 unless I legitimately owe it. And if they're saying I owe, like for example, I'm being sued for $600,000 for defaming a meme, a logo. And if to me, I'm just saying I am undermining his claim that I have to pay him that much in damages. I'm going through every possible avenue to ensure that this guy's claim is exposed as fallacious. And Jones is like, no, the Sandy Hookers do have a point. Like, no, they don't have a point if you really break down the fact that the whole thing was scripted, but he backed up on that story. And I'm just saying, as with Remington, they're all insiders. The NRA, insiders. They're taking hits on behalf of the Second
Yeah, we
Amendment.
know the NRA insiders. We absolutely know they're insiders. They would have called out some of these fake active shooter events for sure. Actually, they would have put out a documentary on FEMA, DHS, HCEP integrated capstone events, and on the drills in the schools that you talk about. Look, you pointed out that even public NPR did a story on how bad these drills were, how they were terrorizing kids, and
Did you hear about the new ones? There's like 90 fake 90 fake accounts or reports that there were shooters, active shooters, caused all these schools to shut down. 90 separate incidents where the schools go into lockdown because they think there's a shooter. And then it turns out this was a hoax orchestrated on TikTok. A bunch of people were calling these in. And what they reported is, even though these are fake reports, it's traumatizing the kids. We have to stop it. And I'm like, don't they understand? Obviously, they don't have the insight that they have been traumatizing them with fake shooters for 20 years. It didn't just start with these latest ones.
Those little punks down there at Parkland, at that school, they were laughing at it. What's her face that said, "Oh, I talked to Nick Cruz."
Oh, she's dead
and
now.
She was smiling during
She's
that
dead
interview.
now. She was interviewed by Dean Ryan, and you know what? She turned up dead after that. That's a
We're
weird one.
told.
Well,
Yeah, we're told she committed suicide or something like that.
yeah, maybe she's given a payday and she's hanging out with George Floyd and Derek
Right.
Chauvin at the island out there with all
But
the others.
somebody down there should be speaking up. Well, maybe they. I just can't believe they're all going along with this shit. Because Parkland was having a drill that very day. That morning they'd had a drill. I think it was a 5.
Have you heard of Birds Are Fake, which is like right now new? It's in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know who's behind that?
Yeah, I think you talked about this.
The Parkland students. The Parkland students are behind the Birds Are Fake, and they're doing it to parody people calling school shootings fake. It's just
What a bunch of little bastards. What a bunch of little bastards they are to do. So they know exactly what they're doing.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily little. I think it's their actors, and this is just
they're
the
actors playing high school students. You're right. David Hogg was probably in his 20s, but he was down there supposedly a student at the school, and he's a total fucking phony. So, it really gives you a sense of what kind of country we live in and what kind of people these are.
Well,
that's really
what kind of people more than half the country are. I mean, more than half the country are on Team
More than
Parkland.
half the country.
There are people who would want you to pay David Hogg $1 trillion for what you just said. They'll take all your wealth. They would say we got to get her off the internet. Yeah, I mean
something. I do get these threats. I post Robbie Parker and Gene Rosen and Wayne Carver, and people come back every now and then. Someone will come back and say, "You better watch yourself, or you'll end up like Alex Jones. We'll sue you."
Right. I get those too.
They're making threats. And all I'm doing is putting out a mainstream media video. I mean, a news story that ran on mainstream television.
Right.
And say, "Hey, guys, look at this." I'm not even saying, "Hey, look at this and tell me what you think." Robbie Parker, I can't believe they actually brought him into that Alex Jones trial to testify.
Dude, he's had 10 years to take acting lessons, and did we see a tear? No. It was just like a bad sequel, but it was worse acting this time around. I'm like, this is the most overpaid and underqualified actor I've ever seen. I'm totally underwhelmed.
I don't know how we get people to realize Well, there it is. It's the cast of thousands. It's the cast of thousands. You hire thousands of extras to sit in the stands of the Circus Maximus and pretend to be ancient Romans for a chariot race. Really very realistic chariot race. If you watch Ben-Hur, they went to a. I mean, that's not. None of that stuff is CGI. That's real stunts. Hollywood used to do amazing stunts, and people got hurt doing those
Yeah, they
stunts.
stopped that because they wanted to condition people on CGI programming. They wanted to get
Right,
rid
which
of
is
the
never going to
reality.
be as is
They,
it ever going to be as convincing?
Never,
I
but
don't
look what
think
they've
so.
done. They've dumbed down and they've lowered expectations to where people aren't even seeing as real as things could be. And it's all just part of this trick of putting us into a new dark age. Anyway, I have to take a break. I'm going to do a later afternoon edition of Infinite Planes Saturday. We'll be taking calls then as well. I have to run a few errands here, but any final closing thoughts for the first segment, Lynn?
Well, just the idea that I underestimated the cast of thousands. It's really a cast of millions,
Wow.
isn't it?
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. It
That's what
is.
we're up against.
Cast of complicit, you could almost say billions if you look at
Right.
the.
They don't care what the truth is. They don't give a damn. As long as they can blame this group or blame that group or come up with some narrative that suits their own fucked up worldview, they won't admit that it's fake. They won't admit that their government, their scientific establishment, their medical establishment, their academia is a bunch of lying charlatans and fakers. Rather than admit that, they'll go along with it
Yep,
by the
and we're not
millions.
going to be cowed, and that's why we like your calls because we're on the same sheet with this. We're not going to be cowed by political correctness or by their thought control, and we know exactly what it is. Have a great day.
Take care.
All right, everyone, I'm going to be back Infinite Plane Saturn Day for 10/22/2022. I'm going to do a reset on everything so I can get the most number of people back in. And if you get text message alerts, I'll be blasting those out again, or go to infiniteplane.media. I'll put a link in the chat. And what I'm doing is I'm setting up some new playlists for the 24/7. We're adding in older clips, we're adding in commercials, promotionals, etc. And I think that it'll be a more structured format 24/7. I'm going to reset the computer and make that happen. Thanks to the chat again, as always. Thanks, Lynn. Interesting call as always. Interesting comments about the 1976 flu vaccine debacle, which even just talking about it sets off red flags, but obviously we don't care. We're on 4 YouTube channels right now. We respawned 4 heads, 4 beaks. It didn't take that long. All right, like I said, we'll be back later on today. If you're not on the newsletter, I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat. Just subscribe and just hit free if you want free. You can do a free trial. If you pay your way in, if you buy in to the Infinite Plane Society, you get full access to the Discord server where the research is cutting edge 24/7 and the memes are 100% free. And that is our new ground zero. Anyway, thanks again. We'll be back.